So believe everything they say.
Well, at the first time that this talk was offered, this is the second time, the sun was in Leo. And so the topic is about Aquarius. And the Rosicrucian Cosmo Conception tells us that the sign and constellation of Aquarius rules the ethers. So we're going to talk a little bit about the ethers. The planet Uranus rules the ethers, and so we're going to talk about that also. That's something I have to get. Uranus is an octave planet, and that means that it has two potential meanings, one in spirit and one in this material world where its planetary body is found. The higher octave of Uranus relates to life spirit, and the life spirit is the higher octave of the ethers. This is all done by a process called reflective projection, where the spirit projects through the macrocosmic mind, and when it does so, there is an inversion. The life spirit is the home of pure, unconditioned, and unconditional love. Love that is undiscriminating. It loves everything, and it loves everyone. Max Heindel called that love altruism. Metaphorically speaking, the life spirit is called the divine feminine, while the divine spirit is called the divine masculine, the former being associated with imagination, the latter with will. For this reason, the higher octave of Uranus rules the purely devotional mystic, which is different from the higher octave of Neptune, which rules the controlling occultist, tries to control all the forces of nature. Now, when light passes through a lens, the image it carries is inverted. When the light of the life spirit passes through the lens of mind into the concrete realms, something similar occurs. There is a creative gender inversion. The higher octave feminine becomes a lower octave masculine. And so when we look at the lower octave of Uranus, it is a very technical planet. So the lower octave rules electricity and ionization, as we saw when we looked at Scorpio, and electromechanical inventions and things like that. Because there is this inversion, and this working from two different levels does not distract from the fact that Venus is the lower octave of Uranus, because both of them deal with the fundamental quality of love. Venus is still individual love and personal love, where Uranus is impersonal and universal love. Now, due to these inversions and ignorance, there is a lot of misunderstanding about octaves in the field of astrology. Materialistic astrologers recognize only the material world. And they see only the material manifestations of Uranus. They see the technical wizardry, and they think mistakenly that Mercury is the octave of Uranus. They don't even know what octavation in planets means, because that comes strictly from the mysteries. They know nothing about the life spirit, and they don't see very many manifestations of pure devotional mystics. No one sees many manifestations of purely devotional mystics. So we can't be blamed for their misopinions because they don't know any better. But it certainly has caused all kinds of confusion and heated misunderstandings, because they don't even know really what mysticism means. The reason I'm going into this divertimento is because you're going to run into it if you do much astrology, if you talk about astrology and mysticism. And not so many people are as fortunate as we are. We are extremely fortunate to have the teachings of Max Heindel, who never misled us and gave everything to us very, very clearly. There are also misunderstandings about the ethers that come from material science. Materialistic science doesn't recognize the ethers. They only recognize what they call energy and particles. They even believe that they have disproved the existence of what Isaac Newton called luminiferous ether. And they believe that they have done that in what is called the Michelson-Morley experiment. In reality, all they have disproved or proved is their own misunderstanding of the ethers. They still describe energy in terms of waves and fields. And what are those waves and fields in? They're in the ethers. So they don't really understand it, or they don't quite get it. Now, the reason for this misunderstanding by materialistic science is due to the Lucifer spirit's influence since the time of the fall. Materialistic scientists are not demons, and they're not liars. They do very careful, accurate work, and they are honest, and they corroborate all of their work. And if somebody publishes something that is not true, that person is hounded out of ever being published again. It's just that they have been misled, and they have taken the Luciferic materialistic illusion hook, line, and sinker. What that materialistic illusion is a half-truth. Just like the fall was a half-truth. The Lucifers told us that we would be able to create new bodies at will, which was true. But they didn't tell us that if we did it out of harmony with the cosmos, that we would mess things up for ourselves and the cosmos. So it was a half-truth. Now, we are told in the Rosicrucian philosophy that the misuse of the creative energy unharmoniously, the sexual energy, is the reason for the fall. And that later we use the creative energy even more malevolently in black magic. So bad that some of us could not even continue on in evolution at all. And this plunged us deeply and darkly into materialistic blindness. Blindness in terms of the spiritual worlds. Now, we are taught that this closed off our inner vision. And we ceased to see things in wholes, because when we have perception, we have only partial information. Whereas when we do things with spiritual apperception, we see wholes. The Bible tells us that the fall brought us into awareness of death. So we have deathly consciousness, and we have a deathly science. All energy, according to materialistic science, is deathly, or it's dying. According to the second law of thermodynamics, all energy is going into chaos, into entropy. And according to the second law of thermodynamics, all work is accomplished by energy passing from a higher state to a lower state. And usually the lowest state is heat, which gets lost into space. Another way of saying the same thing is that energy passes from a state of higher organization to a state of lower organization. This is, of course, a very dismal outlook. Thermodynamics physicists have the highest rate of suicides among scientists, because they have that dismal outlook. Everything is getting bad. And if you spend your whole career seeing how everything is dying, that's not a very positive career to have. For us, we see the solar system as the highest state of energy, at least in our area of the solar system. The scientists see that also. And there are theories about the birth of stars, but the theories, according to materialistic science, are based on randomness happening to be caught into the laws of nature. Science doesn't even think about the origin of nature, and it doesn't think about the high states of organization and where they came from. Even if they think it all began with a big bang, that's a rather random kind of act. Materialistic science does not work with wholes. It does not work with live etheric energy. And they only deal with it when it breaks down, when it is dead, or when it is dying. And when they hear people like us speaking about the origin of energy and a living energy, we are called crackpots. Now, this is true in the biological sciences also. When we speak about vital bodies in plants, animals, and humans, it is considered superstitious. It is considered an unnecessary superstition. It is called vitalism. And materialism believes it has disproved vitalism. And it's really interesting how this comes about. Materialists believe that because they can understand all of the chemistry and biochemistry of life and of life processes, and they know that there isn't anything more. See, that's what blindness to the inner worlds is like. Nonetheless, for all of their knowledge, they can't take chemicals and biochemicals and put them together and make a living organism. Unless you can do that, you really don't know life. We don't know the spiritual life unless we can live it to the point that we participate fully in it. So we're in the same boat to some extent. They can clone and they can edit DNA, but DNA is only a gateway for life. They cannot create a living organism. Now there is a famous experiment by a British biologist named Rupert Sheldrake. And in this experiment, he took little tiny plants and he measured around the plants and he found that there was a field of energy. And that as the plant got bigger, the field of energy got smaller. And from this he concluded that there was a living matrix, which he called a morphogenic field, that went into the plant, and that the plant was formed out of this morphogenic field. Now, this is what he measured was the part of that energy field that was dying. That was definitely, otherwise he couldn't have measured it with the electronic instruments, but he more or less approximated the process whereby the vital body produces the plant. And the materialistic scientists scoffed at this experiment, especially when he started saying things like DNA is not the determinant. You're looking too much into the microcosm when you're dealing with DNA. DNA is only a gateway. Where things are really controlled and where they really come from are more in the direction of the macrocosm. And that really sunk his ship, so to speak. What happened is that there was a $1 million prize for anyone who could disprove his experiment about the morphogenic field. And I don't believe that experiment has ever been disproved. Do you know about that? Whether it has? The situation is nobody wanted to even try. Because if somebody tried that kind of experiment, they would be in that same crackpot field, and they would have happened to them what happened to Rupert Sheldrake. He lost all of his funding for research. And what he had to end up doing was writing books on popular psychic phenomena. He did an experiment where they had cameras in people's houses, and they watched their pets, and as soon as the owner of the pet took off for going home, the dogs became restless and anticipated their coming. And he even made sure that they came at times that they wouldn't ever be anticipated to be coming home. And it always was the case. They did another experiment where they put a camera on people and then they had somebody stare at them intently, and people would have actions so that they knew that, they had some kind of a sense that somebody was staring at them, and they did it with controls and things like that. He does all kinds of lovely psychic experiments like that, but he has to make his money off of popular books because he can't do the research that he would like to do. So, in all of these things we can see that materialistic science can only study materialistic things, material things only. Now, this is not something new. They used to laugh at Luther Burbank, who would talk to plants and get all sorts of things out of plants that other scientists couldn't do. So this is something that's been around for a long time. And so has there been something around for a long time where people are capable of communicating with the ethers or with plants or whatever? What's happening with scientists is they're studying effects, at least from our perspective. From our perspective, what they're calling causes are very secondary effects from something that originates with much higher causes. And they don't want to hear things like higher causes because that sounds like mysticism. Science and technology are wonderful things. but they are not authorities on higher things. I think eventually, you can't doubt it, because these are very astute human beings, and you can't be astute and stay in blindness forever. Eventually it's going to dawn on them, and they may very well be leaders in things where they're doing things that we are not doing so rigorously ourselves. This is why it is important for us to develop higher faculties. Because by focusing on and working on higher things is the only way we can keep ourselves from what Max Heindel calls feeding on the husks of matter or material when he was referring to the prodigal son. We want to become healers. And we want to become healers by treating the causes and not just the material consequences. So we really need to work on developing etheric vision so we can see more clearly. And most of us are at an age now that we can take the time and put it into doing inner work. There are not a lot of things that are demanding of our time and of our energy. And all it takes is the will to focus on these things and do them. Even though the etheric body is a atom for atom identical to the dense physical body, things are done differently in the vital body. One important example is tone. Max Heindel tells us that the vital body has a buzzing vibration, a tone, a pitch, a frequency. And if you are tuned to the ethers, you can actually hear it. He describes the experience as saying it's like hearing bees buzz. It's probably at a higher pitch, though. He also tells us that there is a master tone or a keynote that maintains a harmony or disharmony with the keynotes of the organs in the body. This is again through the ethers. It's all about the ethers tonight. He describes how in illness we get out of tune. And he describes how the vital body sags and loses its tone. Now all of these things, the effects of them can be seen chemically in the chemical subdivision of the physical world, because that's all there is in the chemical subdivision is chemicals. So we want to look at an example so we understand this clearly. One of the chief functions of the human vital body is to vitalize the dense physical body. That is, to keep it alive. In doing this, it is very protective. In its etheric buzz, there is a radiance of energy that will ward off potential attackers. And so we have a radiating protective field around us. And this radiating protective field is especially strong if we eat lots of raw, fresh, leafy green vegetables in abundance. And it has various other means of dealing with the invaders if they do enter. Now when we look at this strictly from the viewpoint of the dense physical body, that is in the chemical subdivision of the physical world, we see something different. We see the etheric causes in biochemical effects, because that's all we can see here. In the dense physical body, this is shown in the biochemical biological activity of the immune system. The immune system senses foreign bodies that have entered into the physical etheric complex, and it tries to either consume them or destroy them or eject them or all of the above. A perfect example of how things are seen differently from the vital body, from the dense physical body, is in organ transplant rejection. The vital body is a matter of attunement. The organs of the vital body are attuned to their keynote. And when an organ is transplanted from one person to another person, it still resonates to the original body from which it was taken. And this is something like taking an instrumentalist who is attuned to the oboe player in its orchestra and putting it into another orchestra where it has been transplanted. Now, if it cannot be retuned, he must be removed or it will ruin the harmony of the orchestra. Retuning of organs is not possible at this time. So the immune system does everything it can to reject and remove that foreign object. Now, it's a materialistic thinking to believe that organs are like automobile parts, that they're interchangeable, that you can take them out of one auto and put them into another. It's a little different where blood is concerned, because blood is more changeable, and someone with a strong will can overpower blood that is transplanted into its system. Eventually that will not be possible at all. But that's far away from where we are. So, what happens is when we transplant an organ from one system into another organ, the immune system goes to work, but in the chemical region we see it as a chemical activity. And it just tries to reject it all altogether. This is a gigantic enemy that has come in. Now our topic is Aquarius and Uranus and their influence in the human vital body, and consequently in the dense physical body. From the Rosicrucian philosophy, we learn that the vital body does much more than building and protecting the dense physical body. It regulates it. Because if there were no vital body, it would be as inert as a stone. So it has to be vitalized and it has to be regulated. Now, speaking very simply, there are two regulatory systems in the dense physical body. There is the nervous system and there is the endocrine system. These two systems function differently from each other, and for the most part, they function independently of each other. But because it is one human being, there is some harmony between them, even though they are functioning independently. In this little talk, which is almost over already, we're now first getting to the subject, we're going to look at the endocrine system. The endocrine system is ruled by Uranus and Aquarius. Now, it is a claim of the occultists with the spiritual sight, the trained spiritual sight, who are every bit as much scientists as the materialists are material scientists. The endocrine glands are materializations or condensations of the etheric vital body. They originate in the vital body, but in order to do something in the dense physical body, they have to be condensed into being chemicals. This is accomplished by the vital body itself condensing glandular tissue. It's always glandular tissue. Glandular tissue, remember, I think it was on Tuesday, we talked about cancer. And we talked about, we had a case of a cancer patient whose tumor was actually formed from glandular tissue. And glandular tissue is, of all the tissues of the body, it is the one that is most subject to cancer. Because of that relationship with the life ether in the vital body, which when it isn't controlled just goes on building and growing uncontrollably in what we call tumors and things like that. The glandular tissue secretes hormones which control and regulate biological processes in the dense physical body. Like many activities in the dense physical body, the process is mostly unconscious. We don't know what our thyroid or our thymus, some men seem to know what their testes are doing, but for the most part we're unconscious of what is being done. I'm lost in my own notes here. One can actually, through autosuggestion, one can activate or deactivate the endocrine glands, but it's a very dangerous thing to do because if you don't know what you're doing, you can mess up your system quite well. I knew a friend who belonged to an occult organization, and in his mid-70s, he looked like he was in his 50s, and he did it by he had exercises for controlling the thyroid gland. Now, the study of hormones, which are chemicals that are concretions out of the ethers, is called endocrinology. And modern research in endocrinology finds that hormones and endocrines are produced in almost every part of the body. They're all over the body, and that's not surprising because the vital body interpenetrates all of the physical body, so if it has a way to work its way into the physical, it will do so. However, most of the hormones are secreted from endocrine glands, which are special centers. So there are special centers of regulatory work in the body. And again, they're sometimes called endocrine glands, sometimes they're called ductless glands because they secrete directly into the bloodstream. It isn't like like when you form urine or something like that it goes into a bladder or into a cavity. It goes directly into the bloodstream. Now, this is very important because it is what we should expect, because the blood is the vehicle of the life spirit in the dense physical body, while the nervous system, which is the other control and regulatory system, is a vehicle of the human spirit, the self or the spiritual ego. Now, the central nervous system is called central because it contains monolithic central control. The brain is the center for nervous activity. Now, there are a lot of neurons in other parts of the body, but they are usually not cognitive neurons, and are not directly controlled centrally. So I don't know there's a name for it, but I don't know what you call those neurons. The endocrine system, though it does have a captain, is distributed. It's like the life spirit. It's altruistic. It's like that universal love. Everybody loves.
It's kind of peripheral.
What?
Peripheral.
Yes.
Neurons.
Yes, but that's not what I was thinking of.
Okay.
One endocrine gland may initiate an activity, and another activity is initiated by another endocrine gland. But because the circulation is so swift and so fluent, it's a very quick communication, and there's a lot of adjustment right away. In the Bible, we are told that humans are made in the image of God. And the Bible also tells us that God is a spirit and must be worshipped in spirit and in truth. From this we can conclude that we as human beings, irrespective of our physical bodies, are spiritual beings. And in that regard, we are like God. But this analogy carries even further. In a peculiar manner, we are made even in the physical image of God. This does not mean that God is a big man with a long beard as he is portrayed in the Sistine Chapel, or as someone sitting in a throne, as it is in the book of Revelation. Those are metaphors. The physical body of God, the dense physical body of God, is the body of our solar system. The solar system is the sun and a system of planets, each of which has a spirit that is all its own. So by studying and observing, we see that the functions of God astrologically are distributed through all of the planets. Each has its own work and each is a specialist. In the physical world and the physical body, which includes both the etheric and chemical expressions, it is analogous. The vital body communicates impulses from the higher spiritual worlds and bodies into the dense physical body and bring things back from the outer physical world. It does this through the two regulatory control systems, the nervous system and the endocrine system. The central nervous system is more central and direct, and some of its function is self-conscious. A large amount of it is not. The endocrine system is distributed, and it is almost always not self-conscious in its function. The endocrine system works cooperatively and harmoniously, just like the planets in the solar system. The endocrine glands do not move like the planets, but in many ways they are very much like the solar system. It doesn't take long in studying astrology, and we can see that sometimes one planet is stronger than another. And that is exactly the way it works with the ductless glands. In one horoscope, Mercury may be stronger than all of the other planets. In that case, it's most likely that the thyroid will also be very strong. If a planet is strong, its ductless gland will be strong. And when that endocrine gland is very strong, it is strong enough to change the character and personality of the body. There are endocrine personality types. And if you want to understand astrology and see people who are specialized in the same way that planets are specialized, you can do that by studying endocrine types. Now, unfortunately, in the 21st century, that is not a popular thing to do. There used to be books of all kinds that would have photographs, and they would talk about the character of pineal types or of pituitary types or thyroid types, but it's hard to find them now. Maybe at most, if you look for an hour or so, you can find photographs and descriptions of only one or two types. But if you know titles, you can probably find them somewhere on the internet. We are studying astrology and physiology to learn to heal. And if we can help someone to curb excessive nervous behavior, then we can help them to avoid thyroid burnout. You know, if a person is a nervous, antsy type of person, they use a lot of thyroid. And when you do that, you burn the thyroid gland out. The thyroid is co-controller of the metabolism. The adrenaline from the adrenal glands is the other part of it. And doctors who study these things say that we put so much demand on the thyroid and on the adrenal glands that the adrenal glands are real tiny by the end of life because they are completely spent. Sometimes if you open someone's abdomen up, you can't even find the adrenals. So it's important, if we study astrology, that we can help people from burning out. This is what happens when we get tired and go to sleep. It's because the vital body is worn out. And this can be a cumulative thing, and we can weaken the vital body, especially if we don't eat a lot of fresh green leafy vegetables. I'm doing it as a joke, but I'm on a crusade to have the world eat lots of fresh green leafy vegetables. Another example is sugar. It's ruled by Venus. And a lot of people, I know several women, and I'm sure there are many of them, that when they don't feel loved and they feel down, they head for the chocolate. Because there's something in chocolate that makes you feel like you're in love. But there's something else in chocolate, and that's sugar. And you're taking in a lot of sugar, you're burning out the adrenaline capacity of the iles of lung neurons in the pancreas. So if we can help people to satisfy their Venusian needs with love, ladies, here I am. We can help them so that they don't have to have that sugar craving. And we can avoid a pandemic of diabetes. It's really bad. It's everywhere. We have sugar in everything. If you're eating ketchup, there's sugar in ketchup. 28%.
Yep.
Wow.
And if you make it at a different percentage, you have to call it imitation.
No kidding. The food industry's had their lobbyists. Wow. As we said earlier, the solar system of the endocrine glands does not have a sun. The entire vital body, which had its birth in the sun period, is ruled by the sun. And we might say then that the vital body is itself a central sun. And Sunlight is as important to vitality as green leafy vegetables. So, without a leader, the endocrine glands work together harmoniously. However, there is one coordinator of the endocrine system, and that is the Uranian pituitary gland, which is sometimes called the pituitary body, and it is sometimes called the hypophysis. Is that pronounced right? Okay.
Hypo what?
Physis, P-H-Y-S-I-S.
P-H-Y-S.
I-S. Now, the pituitary gland is special, and it is important. It is important because it controls all the 7-year periods when things kick in. But it is important in another way. The pituitary gland is the only endocrine gland that is connected to the nervous system. All of the other endocrine glands communicate with each other through secretions of the blood, and that's how they're controlled. This means that to some extent, under self-conscious control, we can activate the pituitary gland in various ways. I'll give you an example. It's almost a facetious example. Some people still know how to wiggle their ears. I can't do it, but there are people who can wiggle their ears as a voluntary act. And esoteric training, when you have developed enough of the creative force coming up the spine, is something like training an individual to wiggle their pituitary gland. And what that does is sets up waves in the ethers across the rising current, and those waves go across and produce a virtual bridge to the pineal gland. And that is what is responsible for opening up clairvoyance. Now, all of the ductless glands can be affected by autosuggestion. But again, I want to say that that's a very dangerous thing to do, because the vital body is subtle. It's not like the desire body. The desire body is very dramatic in everything it does. The vital body is very calm and subtle. And the endocrine secretions that it makes are also very small and very subtle. This is why if you take either animal endocrines or synthetic endocrines, the most common being synthroid, the synthetic thyroid, it's hard to get at exactly the right time and exactly the right measure the amount of thyroid hormone into your blood. And what is usually the case, they give doses that, compared to what happens naturally in the body, it's like taking a little tack and trying to put it in with a sledgehammer, because they're so powerful, the synthetic, or at least the dosages that they give. In the section on esoteric development and the Rosicrucian cosmoconception, Max Heidel talks about the conscious control of the pituitary body to develop clairvoyance. It can be used in other ways. The pituitary body is very important. Uranus goes through a sign every 7 years. And it is at the same place in a sign every 7, in the succeeding sign every 7 years that it was in the sign before. And that the nature of Uranus determines how well we adapt or adjust to the endocrine changes that take place in our body. So Uranus decides when we're going to leave childhood and go into the period of early growth. Or it decides when we are going to cease being children at all and to start puberty. And if you look in a horoscope and you look at Uranus, you can determine whether those transitions will be made smooth or easily. I have a pretty strong Uranus in my horoscope, and most of its aspects are afflictions. The embarrassment of it all. You didn't know how to deal with it. I was one of those people that had acne. I had it on my back, so I didn't want to go swimming, and I had it all over on my face. And that's one of the things that happens with endocrine imbalances. So, by studying Uranus in its 7-year transits of a sign or a virtual sign, together with the progressed moon, which squares itself or opposes itself or conjoins itself every 7 years. That they indicate the biological changes that accompany the endocrine changes. This is why if a person has moon and Uranus afflictions in the natal chart, why it is so difficult going through all the different climacterices of life. All right, that's about all we have time for. Once again, we have opened up a subject that is very, very large and a subject that I hope to come back to again and again and work on it. This is a tentative table. It's the best that I know of, and some of it is original, for the astrological rulerships, and a very simple statement about the endocrine glands seen astrologically. Let's close with the Rosicrucian student's prayer. O God, increase our love for Thee, so that we may serve Thee better from day to day. Let the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in Thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Any questions? It would be nice to be able to take one talk at least for each planet or each endocrine gland, but I don't know when I'm going to get a chance to do that. Yes?
So I have hypothyroid.
Mm-hmm.
What do you recommend for improving the thyroid? Green leafy
You'd have to do a protracted study of your horoscope, but wet green leafy vegetables as a beginner might be very good. Kelp is something that has the mineral elements, especially the iodine, in a way that can really be used by the physical body. Because of chlorination of water and fluoridation of water, we're killing the thyroid. And not only are we overstimulating it, what happens is the iodine in the thyroid gland gets replaced by the more active halogens like chloride, chlorine, and fluorine, and then it's not as functional. It isn't as bad as everybody walking around with goiters, but that's a good place to start.
So we're not only demanding too much of it, we're nourishing it less.
Yeah.
We have to be careful because the iodine, if it's got radioactive iodine in it from the Pacific Ocean, from Japan, or some of this from Fukushima, then we're also causing another problem.
Yes.
Worse problem than...
Yeah, but it's not as likely as if just leaving it untreated.
Well, water is good because it doesn't have that stuff in it.
Distilled water is pretty good too. How to say it? In general, we can either strengthen what we have, which would be what we would do with the use of something like rich in iodine, or we can conservatively use what we have. And you can do quite a lot with ease if you learn to have a much more peaceful, subtle lifestyle. And if you look at all the mercurial things that you do in life, like being fidgety and nervous, or talking a lot, or using too much motion, or things like that. If you look, you just get a book with Mercury keywords in, or Gemini keywords, or Virgo keywords, and look at them and see how they relate to things that you do in your body, and then look at yourself and see, am I being too nervously anxious, and in that way wasting the little thyroid that I have? It's one of those things that is like money. It's not how much you make, it's how much you spend. And if you're careful with a small income, you can do quite well with it. And I would think that from a character point of view, which is the only thing that I'm qualified or modestly qualified to talk about, I think that would be the best way to approach it.
Oh, you said the endocrines change signs every 7 years?
Uranus changes signs every 7 years, yes. And as Uranus goes, like the period of rapid growth is, I forget the name of the hormone. If it gets too much of it gets secreted, it results in gigantism. And these are these people that grow like 8 feet tall and things like that. And then,
Around 8, 9 years old.
yes. Yeah, somewhere in there. It depends from individual to individual. But each of those periods and sub-periods within that, they are initiated by the pituitary body. Well, thank you very much.
One final question.
Yeah.
You talked about sugar. Isn't there sweeteners that don't have the same effect as
Yes, there are a lot of them, but even some of them they have purloined. Stevia is a very good sweetener that is not so bad for the body. But like when I travel in South America, you can go in a grocery store and you can buy a lot of stevia. You can hardly find it here in the United States. You can buy big bags of stevia. Oh yeah, okay. Okay. But
What do you use sweet? What do you have to do?
take the leaves. And stevia is, in the United States, it's the sugar lobby. The sugar lobby doesn't want you to know about stevia. And there are other things along that same line. Right now, the big thing is high fructose. Yes. In the corn industry is very big lobby.
Is that what glycemic, does that have something to do with the
Yes.
strength of,
Yeah.
what does that word mean?
Well, there is hyperglycemic and hypoglycemic. In the first talk in this series, we talked about homeostasis. And there is a homeostasis between insulin and sugar. And if you become insulin low, you collapse because you don't have enough. There's too much blood sugar, and but if you put a lot of insulin in, then you have too little. You have hypoglycemia, too little. So it goes between hypo or hyperglycemia, and it depends on how much sugar is available and how much there is of use of insulin. Yeah, it's something that is actually depends even on the time of the day that secretion. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
This is the stuff comes in
Oh, that's
things like this, which is real handy to have in your purse so if we get somewhere. You know, one of these will sweeten 3 or 4 cups of tea.
okay.
It just takes a tiny little bit, and it doesn't have any bad stuff that I know of in it.
Yes. And I don't know. There's another one that's recently come out.